It ended as strangely as it began. Not with a bang, not with arrests and flashing cameras, but with a letter. A final, bizarre piece of correspondence from Japan's most notorious criminal phantom. After 17 months of terror, of poisoned candy and corporate extortion, of taunting the police and holding a nation hostage, the monster with 21 faces simply said it was done. The letter arrived in August 1985. It was addressed to the media, its stage for the whole affair. The tone was, as always, arrogant and playful. We decided to forget about torturing food-making companies, it read. From now on, we want to lead the life of an ordinary citizen. It was signed off with a final, theatrical flourish, let's be bad guys. And then, silence. They were gone. No more threats, no more letters. The case that had consumed hundreds of detectives and terrified millions of parents was just over. The biggest question was never answered, who were they? But a more interesting question lingered, why did they stop? To understand that, you have to understand the kind of game they were playing. It was never really about the money, it was about something much deeper. It was about the psychology of a performer who had found the ultimate stage. The story starts in March 1984. Two masked men broke into the home of Katsuhisa Izaki, the president of the massive candy company Izaki Glico. They kidnapped him from his own bathroom and held him for a ransom of 1 billion yen. But Izaki escaped on his own 3 days later. For a normal criminal gang, this would have been a humiliating failure. The end of the story. For the monster with 21 faces, it was just the opening act. They didn't just disappear, they pivoted. They sent a letter to Glico. They had laced some of the company's candy products with potassium cyanide. They were on store shelves right now. Panic erupted. Glico pulled millions of dollars worth of products. Their stock plummeted. This was a new kind of terror. It was anonymous, widespread, and aimed at the most innocent of victims' children. And then the letters started coming. This is where you see the true nature of the monster. The letters weren't just ransom notes. They were press releases. They were manifestos. They were taunts. They were written in a strange, almost childish style, using a mix of hiragana and katakana script, full of witty insults and a chilling sense of humor. They called the police stupid and fools. They gave them clues that led to nowhere. They were creating a character, a phantom villain from a detective story. The name itself, Monster with 21 Faces, was stolen from a famous series of Japanese detective novels by Edogawa Rampo. They weren't just criminals, they were fans. They were playing a role. This is the first key to their psychology. The monster was a performer. The entire campaign was a piece of theater, and all of Japan was the audience. A typical blackmailer wants money. They operate in the shadows. They want the exchange to be clean, quiet, and successful. The monster wanted the opposite. They craved the spotlight. They sent letters directly to the media, ensuring their threats and their wit were published for everyone to see. They didn't just want to extort Glico, they wanted to become famous for it. Think about the ego required for this. To believe you are so much smarter than the entire Japanese police force that you can openly mock them. The letters dripped with narcissistic glee. "Dear dumb police officers," one began. "Are you stupid? There are so many fools in this world. They weren't just trying to get money." They were trying to prove their superiority. Every time the police failed to catch them, it was another round of applause, another confirmation of their genius. The money was just a prop in the play. The real prize was the attention, the fear, the power. The game escalated. They targeted other companies, Morinaga, another candy giant, and Marudai Ham, House Food Corporation. Each time, the pattern was the same: a letter, a threat of poison, and a demand for money. And each time, a clever theatrical plan for the money drop. They once told police to go to a certain restaurant and look for a man in a white hat. They told another company to leave the money in a can on the side of a highway. These drops were never about collecting the cash. They were about watching the police run around in circles. They were tests. They were entertainment. The police came close only once. During a money drop with House Foods, an investigator noticed a man watching him. The man had a strange, intense look. The investigator described him as having eyes like a fox. The fox-eyed man became the only real face ever associated with the monster. The police followed him, but he managed to give them the slip on a train. This was a major event. It proved the monster was human, fallible. They could be seen, they could be caught. But it also reinforced their legend. Even when spotted, they were clever enough to get away. For the monster, this must have been the ultimate thrill. A close call that only proved how good they were. But a performance can't go on forever. The audience gets tired, the actors get tired. Sometimes the real world intrudes on the fantasy in a way you can't ignore. For the monster with 21 faces, that intrusion was brutal and tragic. In August 1984, 5 months into the campaign, the Shiga Prefecture Police Superintendent, a man named Yamamoto, committed suicide. He couldn't bear the shame of his force's failure to capture the monster, especially after the fox-eyed man escaped in his jurisdiction. He walked into his backyard, doused himself in kerosene, and set himself on fire. This changed everything. The game suddenly had a body count. It wasn't just about clever letters and corporate panic anymore. A real person, a dedicated public servant, was dead because of them. This is where the psychology of the blackmailer faces a critical. Most criminals who avoid physical violence do so for a reason. They might see themselves as clever tricksters, not murderers. They operate within a set of internal rules. The monster's rules seem to be create fear, cause chaos, humiliate authority, but don't actually kill anyone. The cyanide-laced candies they claim to have placed were often found, but there's no confirmed record of anyone dying from them. It was the threat that was the weapon, not the poison itself. The death of Superintendent Yamamoto broke that rule. It was an unintended consequence, a real-world tragedy that shattered the fourth wall of their performance. And you could see the change in the monster's reaction. They sent a letter shortly after. But the tone was different. The usual gleeful arrogance was mixed with something else. Defensiveness, justification. They wrote, Yamamoto of Shiga Prefecture Police died. What a fool, we've got no friends or secret connections in Shiga, it's Yamamoto who died. What are you going to do to make up for it? They tried to sound defiant, to blame the police for the death, but the fact that they addressed it at all is significant. Before, they were above it all. Now, they were on the defensive. They were trying to convince themselves, as much as the public, that this wasn't their fault. This is likely the beginning of the end. The fun was gone. The game had turned sour. A performer who thrives on the applause of the crowd suddenly finds himself responsible for a death in the audience. The thrill of outsmarting the police was now tainted with real-world guilt. Or, if not guilt, then at least a profound sense of complication. The clean lines of their fantasy, the clever villains versus the bumbling cops, were now smudged with blood and grief. The play was no longer fun to perform. So why did they continue for another year? People don't just stop. Habits, especially thrilling ones, are hard to break. Perhaps they tried to recapture the old magic. They continued to send letters to target companies, but the energy seemed different. They were going through the motions. The initial creative spark of their terror campaign was fading. This leads to the second major reason they likely stopped burnout. Think of the sheer effort involved. For 17 months, they had to stay one step ahead of a massive nationwide police investigation. They had to be constantly vigilant, they had to craft their letters, plan their elaborate money drops, and avoid leaving any trace of evidence. This wasn't a job, it was a 24/7 obsession. The mental energy required to maintain such a high-stakes performance is immense. At some point, it simply becomes exhausting. The thrill of the chase is powerful, but it's not sustainable. Like any addiction, you need a bigger and bigger hit to get the same rush. But after humiliating the police for over a year, what was left to do? They had already won. They had proven their point. They were smarter. They were untouchable. Continuing the campaign risk capture for no real gain, the psychological reward was diminishing while the risk remained constant or even grew as police slowly learned from their mistakes. The game became boring. It had reached its natural conclusion, and this connects to the idea that they had already achieved their goal. If the goal was never the 1 billion yen, what was it? It seems the goal was the performance itself. The goal was to create a legend, to take on the corporate and state behemoths of modern Japan and make them look like fools. From their perspective, they had succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. They were a household name. They had brought massive corporations to their knees, they had run the police in circles, mission accomplished. To continue would be to risk tarnishing that perfect record. The best performers know when to leave the stage. Quitting while they were ahead was the ultimate power move. It ensured they would be remembered as the brilliant phantoms who were never caught, not as the tired criminals who finally made a mistake. The fear of getting caught was surely a factor as well. The fox-eyed man incident was a warning. They were not invisible. As technology improved and as police pressure mounted, the odds of a slip-up increased every day. They were smart, but were they perfect? No criminal is. The longer you play, the greater the chance you lose. For a group or individual so obsessed with control and superiority, the idea of being caught and unmasked would be the ultimate humiliation. It would destroy the entire myth they had so carefully constructed. Better to vanish as the mysterious monster than to be revealed as an ordinary, flawed human being in a courtroom. So, you have a convergence of factors. The tragic suicide of a police officer that poisons the well of their game. The sheer exhaustion and burnout of maintaining a 17-month campaign of terror. A growing sense that they had already won, that they had achieved their true psychological goal, and the ever-present rational fear of making a mistake and getting caught. The final letter in August 1985 feels less like a surrender and more like a retirement announcement. They frame it as their own choice, on their own terms. We are bad guys. That means we have more to do than bullying companies. It is fun to lead the life of a bad man. It's one last piece of theater, one last jab. They aren't quitting because they are scared or tired. They are quitting because they have bigger, more interesting things to do. It's the perfect narcissistic sign-off. The psychology of the monster with 21 faces is not the psychology of a typical blackmailer. A typical blackmailer is a pragmatist. They want a resource, usually money, and they use leverage to get it. Their communication is functional, direct. The monster was an artist. Their medium was fear. Their canvas was Japanese society, and their tools were a typewriter and a deep-seated need for an audience. They represented a strange, modern kind of rebellion. In the hyper-organized, conformist, and successful Japan of the 1980s, the monster was a chaotic force. They attacked symbols of that success, massive, trusted food companies. They attacked the symbol of order, the police. They did it with a playful, almost punk rock nihilism. They weren't trying to build a new system, they were just laughing as they threw wrenches into the old one. In the end, their silence is their most powerful legacy. By never being caught, they remain a myth. We can project anything onto them. Are they a disgruntled former employee? A left-wing radical group? A group of bored, brilliant students? We will never know. And that's exactly what they wanted. They controlled the narrative from beginning to end. The final act of their performance was to take a bow and disappear from the stage, leaving the audience to wonder forever who they were. They stopped because the show was over. The story had reached its climax with the police superintendent's death. The following action was becoming repetitive and risky, and the monster, being the ultimate author of its own story, knew that a good story needs a good ending. And for a mystery, the best ending is no ending at all, just a question mark hanging forever in the air.